Good afternoon, slash evening, everyone. I'm Jill Nash, founder of Women Forward. We are in for a real treat tonight. Senator Slotkin will be our featured speaker. It is so nice to see you. We so appreciate you joining us. And I would be remiss if I didn't start by asking you anything happening in Washington that you want to update us on?
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. Thank you for being active members of your community and getting on things like Zooms like this in the middle of the afternoon. Look, there's always something happening these days, but it is, I'm a big believer that Trump and his enablers here on the Hill are actually trying to distract us from the really important things and get us focused on like whatever the news of the day is. So I try very hard to focus on the things that are both strategic and irreversible, not tactical and reversible.
Right.
And so there's a lot going on. The good news is there actually is a like sprinkle of good news, which is we have started the process of voting on the first bipartisan housing bill in 30 years. It's called the Road to Housing Bill. It's already passed the Senate once. It passed the House in a slightly different form. It's passing the Senate again. And while it's not going to be like revolution in housing, there are a lot of important things in there that will make it easier to build and get middle-class families into housing across the country. So holy of holies, we got that done.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, let's jump in because we know you are incredibly busy, and we, as I said, are incredibly grateful for you joining us today. So in 2025, you introduced an economic war plan.
Yeah.
And I think it included both messaging and tone strategy as well as policy.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little bit more color on that? And yeah, what you think we should be doing?
Yeah. So I think that, and I don't think it's like a secret that Democrats have been on their heels, our heels, since Trump won, right? We don't have to like lie to ourselves that we're hitting it out of the park. And I think that there are things we can do on substance and things we can do on style to reclaim some of the authority that we've lost over the years. And I think I'll just go in reverse order on style.
Mhm.
So, we love a 15 paragraph policy memo. We love like a long thing on our websites about our views on healthcare or on housing. And it's important that what we say has some basis in fact and good policy. I, of course, believe that. But our communication style should not be a 15 paragraph policy paper. And something that, unfortunately, the Republicans beat us on was these like simple, bold ways of communicating. And I think we should learn the lesson from that. So instead of saying, I believe we need to utilize all the bureaucratic powers of the state to ensure that people just be like, it's government's job to make sure middle-class people can succeed in America. Like, you know what I mean? And so I sometimes call that a little alpha energy. I think it's a plain spokenness. This is, as a Midwesterner, this is how we communicate. So I feel like sometimes we could be helpful in that. And then on substance, so similar to Americans responding to like big and bold in the style, I think Americans, unfortunately, they have responded in the past to like big, bold policy ideas.
Mhm.
And I think what we, again, should take away from our loss in 2024 is that Americans feel like, in general, their government isn't providing for them things that help them succeed. And we need to be bold about some of the things that we're suggesting. So instead of the road to housing bill that we're about to vote on, which is good, but kind of ankle biting, like nibbling at the margins, I've just proposed, like, let's declare a housing emergency. Just like we have a FEMA emergency when a tornado comes through, we're short 4 million units of housing. Let's declare an emergency, freeze a bunch of regulations, and then say to communities, if you're not going to be growing, right? If you're not going to be a pro-growth community, you're just not going to get federal dollars. We're not going to build your bridge for you if you're not growing because we're that desperate. So take the boldness of Trump in both style and substance, but make it good policy with decent style.
Right. Can we speak a bit more about the alpha energy? So how would that translate? So our group, just to kind of catch you up, so we started in 2020 with Denise. We by the end of that campaign, we were 750,000 women. When Kamala came in, we doubled, and we're now about 1.5 million women. And our foundation is all social media because we started in COVID. Now we've tried to pivot, and we're much more about mobilization and trying to get out in the communities and doing traditional and non-traditional organizing. What would alpha energy look like for Women Forward?
Yeah. So I think it's mostly um a lot of people think when I say alpha energy, they think I mean male. I don't think that alpha energy has to be male, obviously. But I think it is about certainty in defending and fighting for the things you care about. And I think what people see is Democrats are not big and committing to their ideas. They're kind of like, well, what does everyone else think? And we've sort of been for 30 years, our party has tried to move forward based on consensus where everyone agrees, and we're really conflict averse. And sometimes, whether it's in a group or it's in a party, you need to say, you know what, we can't do everything. So we as a women's organization are going to do two really big things. And we're going to decide as a group, but once we decide, we're going. And then we're going to be pushy about our ideas. And I think about this all the time with because I come from the intelligence community and did 3 tours in Iraq. Like, there is this idea that Republicans own the flag and somehow own patriotism. There is nothing that is more wrong right now than to believe that it is patriotic to be literally subverting the Constitution and turning Americans against each other and just fundamentally screwing up our values. I refuse to hand over the mantle of patriotism to them. We should be absolutely defiant in our ownership of patriotism. We should fly the flags. We should go to the parades, and we should demonstrate with words and deeds what we really believe in. And so maybe for your group, it's like, what are the 1 or 2 things where you're going to concentrate your communal power and put your energy towards, so that it's not everybody gets to do what they prefer, but you're using collective action the way movements have in the past in this country. Successful movements use their collective power. So picking those things and then going whole hog on them.
We completely agree with you on that, by the way. I know that a lot of women in this group, but women across the country and men as well, are alarmed by the voter suppression efforts that are being deployed by this administration. Can you talk a bit about the conversations you're having within the Senate and what Senate Democrats are trying to do to counter that?
Yeah. So I don't think we have to guess. The president is making very clear. He said it in the State of the Union. If my team doesn't win in November, the elections were rigged. It's exactly what he said in 2020, 9 months beforehand. He's saying it now. And pretty much every other week, he's saying something about how the California elections were rigged, or we need to federalize the elections. Like, a lot of words on this have already been spoken. So we don't have to guess what he's trying to do, and whether it's trying to legislate the SAVE Act, which we're blocking up here, or suing 30 plus states for their voter rolls like Michigan, or just using the bully pulpit to message. He is trying to sow confusion about our democracy and get people to do what he wants so that he can try and win the election. His party can win the election. I think that's an open thing. So the what's happening here, and it's not just in the Senate, there is actually a pretty robust ecosystem of democracy groups that sit at a coordinated table and literally are like, okay, this is going on. They share information. They kind of do jump ball for who's going to take legal action, who's going to fund what's going on in this state. There is a lot of pro-democracy activity going on. There's a ton of work going on to help support secretaries of state and clerks in key states, right, including in mine, so that they have their spine stiffened for as the president tries to come at them. And then there's frankly like tabletop exercises going on in Washington of like, what if the president tries to do this? What if, the president won't rule out sending federalized troops into our states or federal law enforcement? What if that happens? What do we do? Right? It's an authoritarian playbook to claim that there's some last minute security threat that only he can engage on, only federalized forces can engage on. What are the legal responses? What do we do on the ground? I mean, these are active tabletop exercises going on in Washington among Senate Democrats and others that are helping us think through and prepare. But there is actually quite a robust universe of people and groups working on this because the president has been so clear how he feels about it.
That's great news that you're doing that. I might, putting on my corporate communications hat, encourage you to also, in parallel, line up a lot of grassroots groups like ours that can disseminate information. So if something happens and we're taking legal action or there's another call to action, we can all be tapped into to get the word out. I don't know if such a directory exists because we're all just kind of trying to do our part in the fight for our democracy. But I think that would make it even more powerful to be able to activate.
It's a great thought. And we can certainly take that to like the democracy table that exists because they're the ones who have, I think, the best links into people. And I think that I certainly know there's like groups of lawyers that are being deployed out to swing states. We've seen this in the past. Like there are also opportunities to kind of get involved like with your feet. Right. And if you're have the right skill set to be observers in your own elections, there's like physical things that we want people to do all within the normal standard way we do observations. But so that's a good flag. And, I am a big believer that Democrats, again, because we like consensus, because we want to value everyone's ideas, it means everyone has a different idea of what they're supposed to do. Everyone's good and well-intentioned, but that means we don't have a cohesive plan that you all have been informed of, right? And that's a real problem. As someone who did war planning for a living, that's a real problem. You can't like take that beach or take that hill when every unit is like, well, I'm really interested in this, and it's like, no, we need to take the hill. And so we need to work as a group, but we can certainly put that into the table and see what they can do for that.
We would be good soldiers, I think.
Yeah.
I read with great interest your project, your comments on the need for a Project 2029. Could not agree with you more. Can you talk a bit more about kind of your thinking on that and what, how we might be able to help?
Yeah. So I think there's really three lines of effort that Democrats should be focused on. One is, obviously the most important thing is flipping the House and Senate. Like that is, we really have a hard time doing other things unless we actually get some accountability back in the system. So that is to me the big enchilada right now. But afterwards, the three lines of effort that I think all Democrats should be involved in one way or another are one, what's the agenda that we can put forward now before 2028 of bipartisan legislation that actually can pass so that people believe the government still works and does good things for them, Okay. Simple things like it's illegal to make an AI deep fake video of a child.
Mhm.
That passed the House or the Senate unanimously, and it's sitting in the House. That feels like a no-brainer, right?
Mhm.
So there's a huge list of that so that people are like, oh, okay, Democrats come back into power and they can still get things done. Number two is an accountability. I mean, the grift, the corruption, the abuse of taxpayer dollars, like that can't just exist and go unanswered. There needs to be a separate thread of effort that's about accountability. And then we need the third line of effort, which is what's the vision for 2029?
Mhm.
And there are a lot of little groups who are kind of doing this. And like, I know a group of former ambassadors who are doing this for the State Department. There are others doing it for, the EPA, like, because we're never going back to what the government looked like before Trump, but the slash and burn of Doge also was deeply unproductive. And so, what do we want to do? What is our belief in the government? And then, what is our platform? Again, in a perfect world, we would already be working on that as a team. What will happen after the 2026 elections is we'll be like into a primary. I mean,
Yeah.
we'll start a primary. So candidates like you, I'm sure, will be invited to meet with candidates. You should ask them, what is your project 2029? What's your vision? What's your platform? And if they don't have an answer to that, that's a real flag,
Yeah.
a real flag. And so all that work that's going on will start to get attached to different presidential campaigns. And those of you who are in the grassroots world should demand that Project 2029 as like a barrier to entry
Right.
for your interest and your support because people want to know what we're about. And right now there's a bunch of different views. I'm completely biased, but I believe the existential threat to the country is that the shrinking middle class. I
Mhm.
think we have a fundamental threat to the country if we do not deal with that problem. So the agenda, this is why I did an economic war plan, because it's got to be economic,
Yep.
at least part of it.
Yep. No, people are hurting. And I think that feeds the disillusionment of the role of government, or if government
100%.
does have a role. Where does the rule of law fit in? Because I think so many of us are distraught because it feels like we are thumbing our nose at the rule of law.
Yeah. So part of that thread of work or line of effort on what's the vision forward is how do we plug some of the holes in our rule of law that have been abused by this administration. I'll be honest, after the first Trump administration, there were a group of us who were like, hey, so we saw through that administration that there were a lot of things that we thought were laws, but were actually just practices and habits, and we need to close those up.
Yep.
And I think there was a common belief that like Trump was never going to be reelected again. And so that was going to go into the basket of history. And so the only thing that we truly changed in law was how we certify presidential elections, the Electoral Count Act. And as someone who barricaded herself in her office on January 6th, like that was good, right? If a state votes for a certain candidate, the electors from that state must certify for that candidate. Revolutionary, okay? So thank you, that changed. But there should have been a huge portfolio of things that we went through and cleaned up. And we didn't do it. And that's shame on us. Now we need to do it.
Yep.
And it's all, basically making things clear in law and then giving teeth to the accountability, right? If you are subpoenaed by the Hill or you um, violate campaign finance laws, but then there's actually no punishment for doing those things. Well, we shouldn't be surprised when people do them.
Right. Or if you are a sitting member of the House of Representatives and you blow off a subpoena for
Right.
many
Right.
months. Yes.
So
Yeah.
these are the things that to me are in that line of effort. Like, what's the vision? How do we clean up
Mhm.
um, uh, after Trump and make sure there's real accountability going forward?
I think you've already kind of touched on this, but I want to double check to make sure that I am understanding your point of view, but I think I do. So reproductive rights
Yeah.
drove historic turnout in 2022. Um, is that energy still here? And I mean, obviously, reproductive rights are critical, but there's so much other stuff that's happened. Do you see economic issues now probably taking a little bit of a step up on reproductive issues?
I think reproductive issues. I think there's sort of a different state by state in the energy. Like I was out in Idaho, and God bless the folks in Idaho who are actually getting on the ballot a vote that would allow choice. Right now, there's literally women every couple of weeks who are being airlifted out of hospitals in Idaho because they're having an ectopic pregnancy or a problematic pregnancy, and the doctors there are so terrified to do anything that they'd rather airlift them to another state than actually perform a procedure they could be prosecuted on. So let me tell you, that is the issue that's motivating a lot of Idaho people because it's a very red state. So they're probably not going to like flip all the seats. Um, but in other places like Michigan, I think sometimes there's a false sense that, well, we passed a constitutional amendment in 2022. We did our job. We preserved the right to choose in Michigan, so we're good.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that, well, if you have the right, but there's literally not a single clinic who will perform an abortion, or you can't get medication mailed to you from other places, actually, you have no access to an abortion. That's been a harder thing to get their people's head around. So I do think people are people are feeling in their pocketbooks, especially with the Iran war, Donald Trump's choices, and they are deeply stressed by they're not paying for summer camp for their kids. They're not able to save every month. I do think those are issues, but don't underplay democracy issues, corruption issues, and rule of law issues. I think people feel like they have to play by the rules, but no one else does, and they're big mad about that.
Yeah, I would hope that they are. I know that you have a very hard stop. So do we have time for one more question?
Yes, I'll be quick too. I'm giving like long-winded answers. It's my fault too.
Okay. So groups like ours
Yeah.
are feeling a lot of anxiety. I think people are fired up. We've been at this for a long time, but we're still fired up. But we're a little stuck on always where to direct our energy. Beyond voter registration and GOTV, which obviously is essential, what do you think is the highest leverage thing that a group like Women Forward can be focused on for the next 5 months until the midterms?
Mhm. So I think that because I mean, we've seen really amazing examples, like in Minneapolis,
Yeah,
of people creating networks, communication networks that really matter when things happen. And I think because you're an online community and not physically in one state and or like, working to flip one single seat somewhere, I think figuring out like how are you able to use the very vast network that you have to quickly, as you were saying before, disseminate information on voter disenfranchisement or voter confusion, voter misinformation and disinformation. So besides getting on a Zoom, how do you get that information out? I think is really important. And then, frankly, I think the, I mean, if it were up to me, if everyone would sign up to be an election observer,
mhm,
the way that your own state allows you to do that. I
mhm.
know that a lot of networks people are not used to like signing up to do stuff like that. I just come from a part of the country where, you know, people can't put up yard signs for Democrats because they get shot at.
Mhm.
Where, like, you know, I always tell people we had like fake women in my first race. We had 2 fake book clubs where literally women told their husbands, I'm going to book club every Tuesday night. And they would come and volunteer at my office because they couldn't tell their husbands their political preference. So people risk a lot in these
Mhm.
places to cast their vote and to support candidates that we believe in. So if you're from a very blue area and you don't have one of those flippable seats, because I think that's where I'd really put your energy, is like, how do you create a network that gets out truthful information and counters misinformation? And then can you volunteer to be election observers so that when this man tries to say, as he did with California, like last week, that you have real firsthand information, um, and you're in the mix in protecting our democracy. I think if I had one ask, that's what it would be.
Okay, and I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I just think this whole rapid response to counter misinformation, disinformation is critical. Senator Slotkin, we thank you for fighting the good fight every day. We would love to have you come back if you have time down the road. But we will take all of your advice to heart. One of the things that we're doing, just very quickly, is we are going to be hosting a creative activism class or training to help women engage in different ways so that it's not always this formulaic, you have to go knock on a door, because to your point, a lot of the women in our group where they live, they don't feel safe. But there are other ways they can show up. And
Yep.
so we're making a big effort against that.
Love it.
Thank you so much, though.
Of course.
And thanks. We hope to see you soon.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your work. Appreciate you all. Have a good one. See ya.
Um, so with that, she's as fabulous as we all think she is, or know that she is. I just want to remind you one more time to please sign up for our training we're going to be doing on June 24th. That's a Wednesday. It's from 5 to 6:30. And it's going to be conducted by a not-for-profit up in upstate New York called the Institute for Artistic Activism. Now, the thing I want to say is don't let the word creativity throw you off. It's merely a different form of expression, right? And coming out of that, we're going to have a guide for all of you. Sandy and team have been doing a fabulous job pulling all of this together. They're working really hard on it. So I hope you will be able to join us for that. Speaking of writing, our Right to Win team continues to do a fabulous job with letters to the editor, with letters to CEOs, with letters to elected officials. So if you're a little bit more on the introverted side and you have 5 minutes, it doesn't take more than that. There are all kinds of letters that need to be written every single day. As if you look at the news, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But there are lots and lots of things to be communicating either your pleasure or your displeasure about. So that's coming up. And then I would encourage all of you to make sure that you use our womenforward.us website as a resource. We have lots of toolkits there that are available to you, available to your friends or other organizations that you might be involved with. But we have everything in there from how to host a house party or how to write a letter or like I said, there will be this one on creative activism. And the other thing that's there that I just want to remind you of is we like to think of it as what the well-dressed activist is wearing. We have a whole array of T-shirts where you can also communicate your thoughts. And I hope you have a good evening. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you soon.